we proudly present Professor Shahbaz Khan, the Director of UNESCO Regional Science Bureau for Asia and the Pacific, as a moderator. And then we have two distinguished speakers, Professor Soontak Lee, Distinguished Professor, Yeungnam University, Korea, and the President of the International Hydrologic Environmental Society, and the Governor of World Water Council, and Professor Jeff Camkin, Adjunct Professor at the University of Western Australia's Institute of Agriculture and the International Water Centre and the Griffith University, Australia. We are ready to take your questions through Q&A box and the Facebook page. And you are invited to fill the attendance list, which we will share during the webinar if you wish to receive the certificate. Professor Shahbaz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sachi. Today is a wonderful day because we have two very eminent professors, as have been introduced by Sachi. Professor Jeff Camkin, who comes from Australia and has been working with UNESCO in various capacities. And we are going to hear especially the work with Japan Fund's Interest today, who is our sponsor for this event. Then other very important speaker is our dear Professor Soontak Lee, who is a champion of water management, a governor of the World Water Council, has been the chair of UNESCO IHP, the International Hydrological Program, which is now the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program. This program is supported in the region through a regional steering committee mechanism by the Japan Fund's Interest, and Professor Lee has been a pioneer in instituting this mechanism in the region. So we are going to deal today with a very difficult challenge about the inequalities. And inequalities are of many different forms. Of course, because of the differences in societal approaches and norms, we have these inequalities, but the inequalities can also be because of the digital divide in society. The level of access is also determined by the political and the social systems. So that's also very important to consider in case of water, which is a very important part of our existence on planet Earth, and for SDG number 6. What can we do for reducing those inequalities? So let me begin first by asking Professor Soontak Lee this fundamental question of water inequalities. What do we mean by them, and how this has been discussed at the various levels with his overview of the world and of the Republic of Korea work, but also in the region where we are today, Asia Pacific. Professor Lee, most welcome. Can you please give us an overview from your perspective?
Thank you, Professor Shahbaz Khan, and it is a great pleasure and honor to be here as one of the speakers on the crossing disciplines to reduce water inequalities. As you know, among Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals, this inequality is SDG 10, to reduce inequality within and among countries. So this inequality occurs when, like, water resources or other resources in a given river basin or society are distributed unevenly, typically through norms of allocation that engender specific patterns along lines of socially defined categories of persons. It is also the differentiation representation of excess of social, like resources. So this is the 10 inequality. But even though we have another SDG number 6 on water, it's a good subject talk about inequalities. And these inequalities need a very intensive integrated approach, which is crucial for progress across multiple goals. So why we have these inequalities is mainly, as I said, uneven distribution of water resources across the water set and the global the societies. And also we have many countries have a lack of available water and its mismanagement. And also because of climate change and uncertainties. And also we have a very unbalances of supply and demand, with also with the rapid population increase. And also the financial, the inequalities and the lack of investment for the infrastructure construction. And the other also important reason is we have a very, different political awareness about the water. Some countries are putting a lot of investment for the water, but some countries doesn't have enough the financial support. And also we have many conflict problems. We need a conflict resolution. So in order to solve these water inequalities, and we need some, the wise knowledge and the skills and the technologies. So this is a good, the subject for the sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this really brings the focus that it's not only SDG number 6, which is about the water security. There is also a very important link with SDG number 10, which is dealing with inequalities by itself. And we need to think about the integrated approaches. And this is an issue not only for one nation, so this is an issue for the whole world. So Professor Lee, thank you very much for a comprehensive overview. And your knowledge is very valuable for this. Now, let me ask the same question to Professor Jeff Camkin from the point of view of understanding how can we bring different disciplines together and what we have learned so far and how do we move forward in tackling the inequality challenge. Professor? Jeff?
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Professor Shahbaz Khan, and it's a pleasure to be here. Also to see my good friend Soontak Lee. Nice to be here. I think the first thing we need to consider is the difference between equality and equity. Equality is the state of being equal. It involves treating everyone the same irrespective of their differences. It doesn't consider the needs and requirements of individuals. Equity, on the other hand, is the quality of being fair and impartial, and involves treating each individual according to his or her own needs. So for mine, it's really equity that we need to be talking about. How do we meet everybody's needs? And as we know, water is critical to everything we do. So inequitable access to water is reflected in inequities across all aspects of life. We see examples everywhere. School children without access to good water and sanitation miss time at school, and their education and future job prospects suffer. Menstruating girls without good access to water and sanitation, not only discomforted, but their safety is compromised. Families without good access to water, it's usually the women and girls that spend a lot of time collecting and bringing home water for the basic essentials, reducing their time available for education and work. Farmers without water for irrigation are at the mercy of the weather, impacting on income and food security for themselves and the community. Communities without good access to water have limits to development and constrained work opportunities for their citizens. Countries without good access to water are disadvantaged through food insecurity, reduced economic activity, and imbalances in both trade and power. And in global regions with inequities in access to water, we see disputes between nations, inability to solve sharing arrangements, overuse of water resources, and subsequent environmental and social impacts. So the inequitable access to water impacts on sustenance, health, education, opportunity, and freedom of all scales. So when we're talking about equitable access to water, we're talking about equitable opportunity. And this is the core of it, the failure to provide reasonable access to water and sanitation is a failure in government responsibility to deliver basic human rights. So that's the core. That's where we need to start with, is the human rights to water and sanitation, and build from there.
So thank you very much for bringing the equity and the basic human rights challenge we have. So considering all these complex challenges, let's now go back to the basics again. We have less water, we know, in many parts of the world, and especially in Asia Pacific. Many of the river basins are already stressed. The availability of water is much lesser than present and future demand. So that's where, if in a nutshell, if I can say, we have water insecurity, and we have a water inequality. We have water inequity. So that's where the concept of water security came. And Professor Lee played a very important role for putting the focus of the International Hydrological Program on the water security. So Professor, can you please give an idea, why don't we deal with the water scarcity rather than we deal with the water security? So how does this come through, and how it has come to the SDGs?
Well, perhaps you can remember when we prepared the IHES phase, and the previous bureau and the Intergovernmental Council made water scarcity as a main theme of IHES phase. Since I became the chairman of the Intergovernmental Council, I changed it to water security, because if we consider with the water scarcity only, its range is very narrow. But like a dry area, Africa, Arabic countries, they mostly dry watershed. But if you come to Asia Pacific area, we have typhoons and a very wet period of flood and disasters. So water security include not only water scarcity, but also too much water problems. So water security include all the water resources we can bring and we can use. So UNESCO made a very concise definition of water security. I know the many organizations in the world, like the Global Water Partnership and other organizations made water security. We have not only water security, the other securities like military securities, health security, and so forth. So we have to keep water as we can use in order to fill, in order to satisfy water right, which was declared by United Nations. So water security became the main theme of water problem in the world, since UNESCO made water security as a main theme of IHES phase. So this phase will go until next year. But even though IHES phase finished, this water security will go forever in the world, in the society. So I think that this is a very important, the goal, and SDG. Even though we have 17 goals, and SDG 6 is mainly concerned with this water security, but the other goals also concerned with this water security problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So water security has become more important in the context. So we have, of course, the water scarcity, which I described before, but making sure the water of right quantity, right quality, at the right place is available, and it's available to all genders, I would say, but also people with the different socioeconomic background. So that's why the water security, bringing the concept of access and equity, but also making sure we can prevent disasters. So that's very, very important concept. Let's now explore one step further. To be able to deliver to the water security, we need to have some tools. And a buzzword which is used is water governance. So Professor Lee, I will come back to you on the water governance issue, but let me also ask now Professor Jeff Camkin, what is water governance and what is good water governance? What would be the elements which we need to bring into different levels in a nation or at the regional or the global levels? Professor Jeff Camkin.
Okay, yeah, great question. So the first point I'd like to make is that at the very core, good water governance must focus on that fundamental right to water and sanitation that we've just talked about, and on ensuring water security. The question I would like to raise is, when was the last time you're in a forum, a water policy development forum, a water strategy forum, or a water planning forum, when the question was asked, how does this policy or strategy or plan affect the human rights to water and sanitation fundamentally? When was the last time you heard that question being asked in these meetings that are developing these sorts of plans and strategies and policies? It's a really important question. Building upon that, we should consider the difference between government and governance. It's the responsibility of our governments to ensure that there is good water governance in place. But it's not the responsibility of the government to undertake all the functions of water governance. Good water governance involves important roles right across society, roles for government, roles for industry, roles for science, roles for NGOs, roles for the general community, etc. And it's up to all of us to contribute to good water governance. Good water governance requires collaboration across society, and good collaboration requires equality and equity. Sustainable solutions to complex challenges like water management, and they are challenging, they're so challenging because they're linked to everything we do. They're linked to everything about life, water issues, and they need transdisciplinary thinking, holistic, problem-focused contributions from numerous scientific disciplines without the dominance of any particular one. And in some times in history, we have allowed water management to be dominated by individual disciplines. To solve water issues which are typically extremely complex, we need all the expertise we can get. We need the hydrologists, the engineers, the social scientists, the biologists, the economists. But good science is not enough. We need to utilize all forms of knowledge. We need to utilize traditional knowledge, Western scientific knowledge, community learning. And good water governance should facilitate this collaboration between scientific disciplines and between scientists, policymakers, and stakeholders. It doesn't matter what scale we're thinking about, individual households or communities or nations, for example. Decisions based on negotiations where there is a power imbalance are inherently unsustainable because they will unravel as that power balance changes. So investing in the capacity of all relevant stakeholders to contribute to the decision-making process on an equitable basis is a key to improving water governance and ultimately to achieving more sustainable outcomes. And if I may, I'd like to throw in a quote from my favorite quote about social learning for sustainability from Sriskandarajah in 1991, that sustainability is better seen as a measure of the relationship between the community as learners and their environment rather than an external designed goal to be achieved. I think it sums it up really nicely. It's about how we relate to the environment, how we relate to each other, and the ongoing process of learning to do that better.
Thank you very much. That's very comprehensive. And governance is not same as the government. And there are different stakeholders which need to be empowered, and we need to think it from different disciplines and how do we move forward. That's where there is a very important program of UNESCO, what we call Hydrology for Environment, Life and Policy, a program which has also been promoted through the Japan Fund's Interest, Regional Steering Committee mechanisms. So Professor Lee, would you give us some idea about what is HELP and how it can help at the level of a river basin or at the country level, and also give us an overview of the regional steering mechanisms to promote cooperation among nations, which you have been a pioneer in this region.
I better start with how the hydrological activities were, executed in Asia Pacific region in connection with IHP, but also HELP program. And from 1993, the Regional Steering Committee was established. And after that, we had a very active, activities in this hydrological one. And this is a kind of a unique, the successful example of hydrological activities through whole the world. So this was the Regional Steering Committee, and it consists of all Asia Pacific representatives nominated by the each member country. And also this was supported by Japan Fund in Trust. So it was very active. In this program, we started with the AP FRIEND, Asia Pacific Flow Regimes from International Experimental Network Database, in which we had flood studies and frequencies and precipitation. And from here, we could make some comparative studies between whole countries and watershed. And then we published even catalogs and also the other the research papers, symposia, training programs. And also after that, we had more concentration on the HELP program. HELP is hydrology for environment, life, and the policy. Then I proposed that we have Asia Pacific HELP program. In Korea, we had Gamo River Basin as a HELP basin. So this AP FRIEND, AP HELP, and also IHP network studies became the great beneficiary for all member countries and also all regions for IHP activities for their solution of water problems. And this includes the solution of water inequalities. And also particularly regional network of AP HELP was combined with IWRM studies. So this becomes very active and helpful for Asian countries. And also the other, the IHP activities through the whole Asian countries. This became, previously it was IHP RLC in Southeast Asia and the Pacific region, but it's now Regional Steering Committee for Asia and the Pacific region, include the whole western and eastern part of Asia, and also Pacific, including Philippines and South Pacific area, island. So IHP activities in this region is very active, but not only this Asia Pacific area, the other through whole world, the IHP activities are very active. Is managed by the UNESCO headquarters. And apart from these the activities, we are continuing this activity, but we need to make some different direction, like AP HELP with IWRM or any integrated approaches for the solution of water inequalities in the future. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So since 1993, Professor, that's a long time, and many of our viewers today may not be even born at that time. So 27 years of hard work bringing together all these aspects of the elements which are the science elements for water security, but also bringing the social and governance aspects. And you have mentioned several programs which have been delivered through the RSC, which has been supported by the Japan Fund's Interest. And those are the Catalog of the Rivers, the IHP Friend Program, and the IHP Help Program. So those are very, very critical programs. So now let me turn to a very important area. There is a lot of interest in water, certainly. And water inequality is there. So Professor Lee has just described the work of 23 years. We are making progress on many areas. We can measure water better. We have better tools to visualize different problems. And perhaps we can devise some of the answers to those problems. But Professor Camkin, the challenge still remains. There is no real proper equity of water, no real empowerment of stakeholders. And in many cases, we have a challenge that the stakeholder consultation is more of the tokenism. How do we empower the stakeholders, and how does really water governance can provide the much needed equity, and what is the role of building capacity of stakeholders that they understand their rights and they understand these issues so they can demand water equity, and the water equity is implemented in a real way. So would you give us some ideas from your experience, Professor Camkin?
Yes, look, I think you hit the nail on the head. I personally, I think it's capacity building is at the very core of dealing with the water challenges we have. And that starts with understanding, an understanding of the rights, first of all, of citizens to have good access to water and sanitation, but also an understanding of their ability to contribute to better water management, and an understanding amongst policymakers that having the community contribute to water management is of great benefit to the outcomes and to their own jobs. Once policymakers understand that the communities have a great deal of knowledge to contribute to improve water management and embrace that knowledge and different forms of knowledge, it's a great step forward to improving the water management systems, and in particular to having the ongoing support for the policy decisions and their implementation. So knowledge is critical of understanding the roles, and then training, building up the ability of all the stakeholders to actually contribute to the water management. So that means developing shared understanding of the problems. It means developing ways to discuss and have dialogues about the different opportunities, the different types of solutions that may be utilized, and learning to talk a similar language to each other, whether you're coming from a scientific background or you're part of the community or you're working in industry or you're a policymaker. We all need to learn to talk together. And for mine, that's a big part of the future, is developing this capacity to work together on improving water management. And one of the things we're trying to do through our own journal, World Water Policy, is encourage new and emerging water leaders and thinkers to put out their ideas about different ways of going about water management.
So thank you very much, and thank you for mentioning the World Water Policy Journal, which welcomes, of course, case studies, interesting insights, and opens the door for the people who can bring practical knowledge. So let me now take this to Professor Lee. Professor Lee, you have this International Hydrological and Environment Society, IHES, which also has a journal. It has brought together stakeholders from the region. You have been publishing a journal yourself. How can we bring this knowledge sharing, which of course the RSC you described has been doing, also the efforts like yours? How can we build on those efforts and encourage young people, young scientists? They can publish, they can share their ideas, and they can network more widely.
Well, this International Hydrologic Environmental Society is kind of to encounter the urgent challenges in water problems. And since its establishment of beginning of the year of 2000, in order to meet such urgent sustainable management of hydrologic environmental matters, and we were providing an international forum for hydrologic environmental issues, and also advancing hydrology and related environmental research, and promoting hydrology environment education, capacity building throughout by improving global access to relevant data and information, and networking with other organizations to advance common goals and improving exchanges of information and experts. Previously, when we had IHB national meetings and also RSC meetings, not only in Korea, but also Southeast Asia and Pacific region, we gathered together and we discuss regional water problems. Like, for example, Kyoto University people brought some disaster and flood problems and typhoon problems. And also Southeast Asia countries brought not only the typhoon or flood problem, but also water scarcity problem. And also the Northern Asian countries where they have a very severe drought problems brought some the problem how to get more water from the water set in connection with the JFIT program of UNESCO. So after discussion and providing some papers, we published the journal, and also we communicate with the local people on these issues, how to adopt this knowledge, transfer information, transfer knowledge. As you know, in Asia Pacific area is a very wide and a big country, and also hydrological characteristics are not same, very different. So through the comparative study, through the AP Health or AP Friend, we could make a kind of a common the solution, how to apply this the technique to adapt their countries. But it's not easy. As you know, Northeast Asia and the Southwest Asia and the Pacific area, we have a very different water characteristics. So in order to solve water problems, water inequalities, and we need more, active exchange and also data problems. As you always emphasize the South-South cooperation program, so through the UNESCO network, like UNESCO chairs, UNESCO Category 2 centers in Asia and also Pacific area and on Africa, we are having some frequent, the discussions and the communications to exchange our, skills and the water problems. And also UNESCO Jakarta office made the MUCP program from which we could learn many problems, not only water problem, but also other social and education and other, the society problems in Asia and the Pacific areas. So this kind of activity should be continued and would be very helpful in the future, I think. Yes.
Thank you very much. That's a very comprehensive overview of the activities which have been undertaken. so that people can work together. And very importantly, Professor, you mentioned that the issues are not the same. While water security is a common challenge from the access, from the supply, and also sanitation to have those basic human rights and basic human dignity, but also the disasters very important. So, and different parts of the world have different challenges, and in Asia Pacific is not homogeneous. If I can continue with you, Professor Lee, one of the very important countries we serve, and we have been together to Timor-Leste, and you help colleagues there understand some of their challenges. Can you give us a bit more idea about the possible collaboration and how IHP can help Timor-Leste?
Well, I visited Timor-Leste several times, and I found they have a very, good, resources, not only water, but also geological resources as well. So when we had a meeting with the Timor-Leste people, they need some active in the cooperation with the developed countries by using some advanced technologies and the knowledges. I don't think they have any IHP activities much, but in the future, they need active IHP organization, and also we can collaborate together to have some closer collaboration to develop and adopt the IHP the policies to Timor-Leste area. Particularly, they have a good groundwater resources, I guess, and even though they have surface resources enough, but they need to develop these groundwater resources in order to use, and also they need not only water problem but also sanitation. So water and the sanitation, the policy would be very helpful, I think, for them. So personally, my society, International Hydrology Environment Society, had a special the memorandum with the Geological Society of Timor-Leste in order to future collaboration and joint research together. So far, it wasn't very successful, but in the future, I hope we can bring more IHP people to Timor-Leste area to develop more water problems to solve.
That's very good example, Professor Lee. So one of the roles for these regional steering committee mechanisms and experts like yourself is to help understand the problems with a different lens for countries like Pakistan, like Timor-Leste, or the countries like Indonesia and others. And you gave us the example of Timor-Leste. So maybe one of the roles can be, how can we establish a mechanism within the nation itself for coordinating all the different aspects of water management? And then how can we help with the critical resources like groundwater, but also the issues like flooding and others, and the body of knowledge can be used very readily. I already see some questions are coming, so colleagues, continue to put your questions in the question box and through your comments or on the Facebook Live. Both Professor Lee and Professor Camkin will be very happy to answer them, and where I can contribute, I will. Jeff, now let's take this example from Timor-Leste to with you have been working in Australia, and we had a very interesting program, what we call the Cooperative Research Center for Irrigation Futures, where we came up with the ideas of sustainability, and that followed with sustainability science and the work we have been doing under Japan Funds Interest. So that's one aspect in which capacity building is very important, but understanding the problems with the shared understanding of the stakeholders very, very critical. That's a key lesson. Maybe you can give some more light there. And then for nations like, for example, Pakistan, strongly dependent on water resources, there has been a very excellent effort of linking Australia and Pakistan. And in the process, you have trained many colleagues and stakeholders with different backgrounds, not necessarily water scientists or water managers as they are like in the engineering departments. Can you give us these two aspects? The shared understanding of problems from a sustainability point of view, and then building capacity by cooperating among nations. And people who need capacity building not necessarily are professors and senior managers.
Yes, thanks very much, Shahbaz. I guess the first point to make is that it needs to be very context. It is very context dependent. As you mentioned, it's not homogeneous. The issues are different in every location, in every community, in every nation, and so whatever we're doing must always be cognizant of that those differences. And the first role you mentioned was with the Cooperative Research Centre for Irrigation Futures in Australia, where we were looking at the question of what would irrigation look like in the future. And most of the work I was doing was looking at Northern Australia, where there's been for 100 years ideas of expanding irrigation in Northern Australia, typically historically founded on just taking the same irrigation that was used in the south of Australia and applying the same mechanisms, the same approaches in the north. And it became very clear, working right across Northern Australia and working with the scientists and the communities and the government stakeholders, that approach would not work. Northern Australia is far different to the south. It's different in terms of the economics. It's different in terms of the physical attributes, the patterns of rainfall and climate, the social fabric of society. Everything was different. And so just replicating something that had worked or not elsewhere and taking it to a new location, expecting good outcomes, was a folly. So that was a big learning, that we need to think through a northern lens in that case. And we take that idea into all the other things that we've been working on. You mentioned Pakistan. I had the good fortune to coordinate an Australian aid program of 24 participants from Pakistan in Australia for a 6-week period a few years back. Now, we had people from with PhD backgrounds. We had large farmers, innovative farmers. We had farmers with small plots of land who were relying on rainfall. We had scientists. We had social scientists, economists, etc., etc. And we put them in a room for 6 weeks together. And when I say a room, it was physical rooms. It was sometimes we went to the beach for sessions. We did a field trip through the Murray-Darling Basin for 10 days. And everything was translated between Urdu and English, English and Urdu for 6 weeks between us all. It was the most amazing experience. We learnt so much, and the learning that we all had from talking about water and irrigation from all of these different perspectives and helping each other understand what we all knew and the backgrounds we all had and how that could contribute to solutions was really quite remarkable. And I know this group remain very good friends, and we're often in contact now some years later, and that learning continues to be shared. So for me, a lot of it is about the idea of being willing to share your knowledge and being willing to assimilate the knowledge of others and remain focused on the problem rather than focused on your discipline or the solution that worked before. It's stay focused on the problem, use all the expertise you can get from any source you can get it, and work together around that problem, which really brings me to the idea of sustainability science, which was one of the programs funded through the Japan Funds in Trust. and I had the good fortune to work with you on that, Shahbaz, and it took 5 or 6 sustainability demonstration sites in Southeast Asia, in Cambodia, the Philippines, Malaysia, and what was the other one? Or several in Malaysia, and
also
really
Indonesia. Indonesia, we have several of those areas.
And Indonesia, and really look at this concept of sustainability science and how that could help improve the way things are managed for more sustainable outcomes. And that is really all about 5 steps. The co-realization of the common problem. So getting everyone together and understanding what the problem is. Now, I'm aware of a program in New Zealand, in the north of the South Island of New Zealand, where they spent 1 year with scientists and the community working together to understand the problem. 1 year, but with exceptional outcomes as a result of that. But they spent the time to understand each other and problems. So co-realization of the problem, then co-envisioning the future. So, okay, where do we want to get to?
Yeah.
We're here, we've got these problems, where do we want to get to? What do we envision? Talking about that and reaching some agreements on where we're all aiming towards. Then co-shaping towards that future society. What do we need to do to get from where we are to where we want to be? Then looking at the step of co-implementation. Okay, how do we work together to achieve those steps, to get the steps towards that vision that we have from where we are now? Yeah. And of course, following that process, monitoring and evaluating the improvement towards that, and that this is a cycle. This is an ongoing process of learning within the community with all the knowledge that they have available to them. And that brings me back to that quote from Srikandarajah from 1991, that sustainability is basically a learning process about how people relate to their environment and each other.
Thank you very much. That's a very good set of examples. And thank you for bringing the focus back to CRC and what we learned in Northern Australia, not same as the Murray-Darling. We needed to look into Northern Australia with a Northern Australian lens.
Yes.
We need to look into the problems of Timor-Leste with the Timor-Leste lens, as Professor Lee has said, or in Pakistan with the Pakistani lens. Also, thank you for drawing this very important conclusion that water is everyone's business. And it does not matter whether someone has a PhD, a master degree, or someone is a farmer, or someone is responsible for the household related water. All of us can learn and need to learn. And once we do co-visioning of future, then the better futures can come. That brings me to the last question. We are facing this very serious pandemic, COVID-19. We have held several meetings related to what water sector can do. Nations are investing huge sums of money, like from 0.5% to more than 20% of the GDP. The losses already because of COVID are more than $2.7 trillion, and everyone is trying to have a better future. But if we continue with the future, which is more with the fossil fuels and doing business same as before, can we really develop resilience and have everyone got the access to water, especially people who are affected most, maybe the poorest of the poorest, at the bottom 1 billion people. So how do we make sure they get access to water and sanitation? And in my view, the best investment is we should invest more into water resources. And there is a very interesting article which I've recently read by the World Resources Institute. If we spend 29 cents per person per year, then we can get the water security. The return on investment is for 0.29 cents per capita per year. You can get $6.8. So the return on investment is very high. So Professor Lee, What would be your final thoughts for post-COVID water investments and water security? Where should we
Well,
go? How should JFIT help us?
yeah, during the COVID-19 period and also post COVID-19, I always thinking what we have to do. The main thing is how to keep our water security. As I told you before on the definition, water security is the capacity of a population, firstly, to ensure access to equitable quantities of water of acceptable quality for sustaining human and ecosystem health on a watershed basis. That's ecosystem health and human and ecosystem health. That's the main thing, first one. And the second is to ensure efficient protection against the water-related hazards, flood and the drought and so forth. So in order to protect our human beings and ecosystems health out of COVID-19, we should take care of how to keep water security. So in the future, I would like to emphasize on our cooperative activities through the UNESCO IHP or IHES in Asia Pacific with the Sustainable Development Goals and South-South cooperation first. And secondly, active implementation of IRRM with AP help in developing holistic sustainable solutions and the development of IRRM strategies with the help approaches for sustainable water management, because we need manpower, human being with there no any influence by coronavirus. So how to keep this capacity building and also continuing to implement the IRRM in order to have a safer water security in the future. So also global adaptation coalition of the network of platform like a South-South cooperation or UNESCO IHP network or other sustainability network. So this is very required, needed activity in the future, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for all your views. Professor Camkin, for final words on post-COVID and this capacity building area, where should we put and focus our efforts for a better future, for visualizing a future which can take us to more resilience and more equity and more of the water security?
Yes, look, obviously these are challenging times and water is central to the whole issue of COVID-19. But it's also an opportunity for transformation, and we have to take that opportunity. We have to take big steps in the way we share knowledge and be perhaps more open in sharing knowledge that we have and information that we have. UNESCO programs have a really important role to play in that through systems like the JFIT and MFIT and programs like the Malaysia UNESCO Cooperation Partnership, which have established networks that are already in place around the world and particularly throughout Asia and the Pacific, which are available to continue to share knowledge about improving water management under this scenario. So there's a really important role to play there to help people take the knowledge that is available from all around the world and utilize that knowledge locally through those local lenses that we were talking about. Work out what is relevant to us here. How can we learn from what's been done elsewhere to deal with the challenges that we have as a community in this location. So for me, that's the main thing. It's transformation and gathering that knowledge, being willing to share all the knowledge we have and having mechanisms to support that.
Thank you very much. That's all the time we have. Let me try to summarize today's very important discussion with Professor Soontak Lee, and with Professor Jeff Camkin, who have worked with UNESCO for many programs, including the International Hydrological Program and Sustainability Science, closely linking with the Japan Fund in Trust. Today, we have discussed water inequalities are a serious challenge for us, and it's not only the inequality from the point of view of SDG number 6, the social inequalities, like what Professor Lee discussed with the SDG number 10, very, very important. So if we have to deliver the sustainable development goals, we must address water inequalities. Also, very importantly, it has been discussed today, the Regional Steering Committee mechanism supported by the Japan Fund interest in this region has been very instrumental in bringing forward research, farming those networks and associations which have produced many useful outputs. Those outputs, we will make them available through our sustainability insight, through our links. And that's where, very importantly, the program Hydrology for Environment, Life and Policy, integrated water resource management. There are several of those publications which are available and can be useful for this time. COVID has given us many, many challenges, and we need to carefully look into what are those challenges. And that's where Professor Camkin's idea that we need to look into the problems with the local lens. And Professor Lee has highlighted the issues in South Asia are not same as in North Asia or East Asia or in the Pacific. So we need to have the local lens to visualize those problems. The challenge remains, how do we move forward? How do we become more resilient? How do we provide water as a human right and sanitation as a human right? And that's where the observations at the global level are, while the investments are taking place into building back better post-COVID, water security, water equity, better water governance remains a challenge. We need to continue to build capacity. One of the recommendations is maybe we should invest 1% of the GDP into water-related services. And a very good estimate also is if we provide 29 cents per person per day for this period up to 2030, we can provide water security to everyone on planet Earth. But at the same time, we need to make sure that these investments which are being made are underpinned by the right kind of knowledge. And that's where Professor Lee has kindly offered his own journal and his expertise, and the World Water Policy Journal, very, very important journals. We can make them available in terms of their links to colleagues who want to participate in such efforts. So with that, I thank everyone today for their active contribution. We will be following up. Water is everyone's business. To learn about water management, to learn about how can we solve these inequalities, you do not need a PhD in water resources management. You do not need to be a master's. Water is everyone's business. And if it is everyone's business, we all have to work together to create awareness. We must work together to co-visualize what are the solutions, and we should co-envision where is the future, and that future, how do we achieve that future where everyone has access to water supply and sanitation, and our catchments and our environment is well maintained. And as we say, how do we make sure we leave no one behind? And that's where our work, while it is very difficult, if we work together, as the examples have come from two eminent professors, we can solve many of these challenges, but one step at a time, working together through cooperation, South-South, North-South, triangular cooperation, UN system, working together with academia, working together with civil society, governments at different levels, and creating a future which is better and building back better to deal with post-COVID situation and any future challenges as they will come. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Over to Dr. Sachi.
Thank you very much, Professor Shahbaz, Professor Jeff Camkin, and Professor Soontak Lee, and all participants. Please don't forget to fill the attendance list through the link, which we shared in a chat box. It will be open for 60 minutes. Please do not miss our upcoming MFIT Sustainability Insight Part 12 on 10th August from Kuala Lumpur to Kaduna, water cooperation across continents. For further information, please visit our Sustainability Insight Facebook page and Instagram. We wish you a good day, stay safe, and see you all soon at the next event. Thank you.
very much.
Thank you
Bye.
very much. Bye-bye.
And also those colleagues who have asked questions, we will give you personalized answers from Professor
yes.
Camkin and Professor Soontak Lee. Thank you for asking those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
See
thank
you
you
next
so
time.
much.